Science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery with your hosts, Eric Shapiro, David North Martino, John Copenhaver, and Al Warren. Heard on 106.5 FM Los Angeles,
102.3 FM Riverside,
and 105.0 AM Palm Springs.
You are back in the House of Mystery, and I'm Al Warren, and you're not. They didn't like that last time when I said that. You know, I keep getting complaints. Yeah, I keep getting complaints, you know. I'm trying to be loved, and they're not doing it.
No,
I don't know. Yeah. I should offer free money to everyone, and then they'd love me. Yeah.
You'd be like Oprah. Get everybody a car.
Yeah, you won a car. You won a car. You won a car.
You want a car.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen, but, you know. I have an older car. Jeez, I'm not even buying myself a new car.
You're not.
No, it's terrible.
You deserve it.
I do.
You deserve it, Al.
I do a new smart car.
That's right.
Yeah, that goes with it. I guess I've got the Tesla. I never use it, but oh well.
Yeah.
It's the point of having it. But I'm saving
That's right.
energy. Anyway.
That's true.
And well, today we are continuing with our week of interesting interviews, and you know, everything from cops to killers to geez, who else have we had? I can't remember, but really interesting. So today we're going to have a guy that was with the CIA, and he's got a new book out, or a newer book out, fairly recent, and the book is called Shadow Masters Reloaded, and our guest is JT Patten. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Al. Appreciate it. And hello, David.
Hey, JT.
Well, JT, so you've probably already done background searches and everything on us. You know everything about us. Probably have pictures. No, I mean, I say that jokingly, but before we get into the book, a lot of people think they have an image of what a CIA officer is, or a person that's in with the CIA. I know you probably don't want to talk about it much, but just it isn't really quite like what we see on the movies, is it?
No, it's not. And let me, if you don't mind, let me back up just a hair. I'm not released as a CIA. So I'll just say I am an intelligence professional who's worked in the intelligence community, and I will say that anything that I write has to go through both CIA and NSA. But I just wanted to make that little distinguishing modification or disclaimer.
So you're not James Bond?
So, yeah.
Well, I thought maybe. That was pretty exciting for a minute. How did your life get? I don't know how to phrase this, but how did it get from being an intelligence person, and into writing books, thrillers, I guess you'd want to call them. How did that happen? How did you jump over into writing these books?
Sure. Well, it was largely by mistake, as most things happen. And I've always been, I'd say maybe later in my teens, I became more of an avid reader, thrillers and the like. Earlier, I had been, more about horror and suspense. So it's always been a little bit of a part of me. Tom Clancy, Jean Le Carré, and others. So when I finally got involved in the intelligence community, and then with more experience in counterterrorism, those worlds seemed to get a little bit closer. And I always had things running in my head about, what a great story this would be. Or, on the other side, as I was reading a story, I was thinking, boy, that's not how this is at all. And I had a good friend, in the operations community. He and I were both readers, talked about it a lot. And he was very close friends, childhood friends with one of the famous authors of the time who was writing a lot of thriller books. And that individual used to go to him asking a lot of questions about, operations and the intelligence community and, what do you think is going to happen in this country? Or we just heard that these people were assassinated, was that, us, type thing. And so on occasion, my friend, Sean would reach out to me and say, hey, I've got this question. This might be a little bit closer to you. Can you answer this, as appropriate? And the more that this happened, over maybe a period of a couple of years, Sean and I kept thinking, these authors tend to reach out to us about the nuances of the intelligence community or special mission units and things. Well, they've got to be making boatloads of money. Why can't we do this? If we're the ones that actually have this knowledge, we should be the ones out there. So he and I made a bet. And first one to write a thriller novel would win that bet. It was $1. And I happened to have been the one that made it to the finish line a couple years later. So at that point in time, I had the book. I had written it, or the manuscript. So I reached out to the individual who we had been helping and asked if he might be able to assist. How do I get into the publishing world? How do I get this edited, reviewed, what have you? And he wasn't willing to help. So it pissed me off so much that I put everything that I absolutely had into pushing that book forward, whether it was ready or not, just so that I could get out there and then go to the next one and try to make it to the chart so that at least at one point in time, I could have a book that was above his in the selling ranks. So ultimately, I guess that's how it happened.
There you go. It's all about the popularity. Nothing. It's interesting. So, who have you created this main character, Sean Havens? This is a Sean Havens Black Ops thriller, this book. So Sean Havens is who?
Sean Havens, when I initially wrote this, so this is a book that was the first one that I wrote. It was independently published at first, and then later on, after I had been writing and publishing other books, a small press picked it up. So it's just been re-released, re-edited. At the time, I'd say that it took bits and pieces of some of my history. They say, write what you know. So I brought some elements of that. I also then brought in some elements and aspects of my friend Sean, who is the namesake. And then I think there was just that reality of, we know that there are all of these heroic type of personas that we look at in thriller books, but I never felt like that, and nor was I really ever doing anything like that. And many of the folks that I was working with were similar. So it was kind of a contrived mix of what one might think that this type of a protagonist should look like, but then there was also the tempering with the everyday man. That most of us were, people that had families, people that had marriages, we're running ragged, tired because we haven't slept, we're traveling a ton, and it's not, just kind of a flip the next pages because now you're on you're downrange and then you're engaging the enemy and now you're going to the next and you're going to the next. It was like, damn, I'm tired and I'm hungry. And so I tried to pepper the book with those aspects of it, and something that, somebody might get a smell out in the field, in the Middle East or something, and think, wow, that smells like breakfast, and that smells like pancakes, and damn, I could really use some pancakes. And so while it's a little tongue in cheek of some of the things, and folks may think it's kind of schmaltzy, but ultimately it was about things that can happen that are a little bit more realistic than one might think.
So Now, is it kind of tricky writing this type of book in these times, especially as lately, like, because you talk about false flag terror events and stuff in this. I just wonder, because it's so, the times are so charged lately in the last 5 years or so. There's such a, contrast going on, I guess. So did you have to be careful on how you present a case like this?
I think so. I mean, first and foremost, I was required to submit everything to the intelligence community, and then because of other involvement, it also had to go to the Department of Defense. I had to be more careful with the tradecraft that I was applying to thwart, the antagonists in this. I think that there is also an element of, I wouldn't say sensitivity, but again, going back to reality, most of the books that I write, all the books that I write, deals more with aspects of gray than black and white. And I usually find that our antagonists can be as culpable to things as our protagonists can be. Similarly, when we're, conducting missions abroad, our target groups under other circumstances might be pretty decent people. Now, again, those can argue, you mean abusing women and killing babies and things like that? Yeah, of course. But by and large, there's a large population that's been driven by their culture, their history. And so I try not to demonize groups too much as I do present their vision in that moment of what is occurring, as well as our vision of that. And that's where the conflict sometimes comes out, as these are real people. And I think sometimes that sleaze that gets on us as, the protagonists or the good guys are sometimes when we have to make difficult decisions to win wars, take hills and things, or to create effects that may have started off with having to cause some type of a disruption. Maybe it is killing somebody. Maybe it is targeting somebody. Somebody that could be innocent, but we know that that's going to flush something out or create change in a certain way that's advantageous to us. And so I think part of the writing that I also do, that I am trying to be also sensitive with, and it can ostracize some readers, is that we can do some very horrible things, and it's not just an even playing field of good and bad, black and white, but somewhere in between lies the truth. And in many cases, everybody's at fault.
Well, speaking of tradecraft, as you were talking before, you mentioned reading other novels and how you were like, that's not really how this actually happens, how this happens within the field. Do you have to obscure what does happen because it's classified, or do you have to change things for drama? And how do you go about doing that?
A little bit. That's a great question, David. I think that there's certain things that are really blatant that I can't do. I got into a little bit of trouble with NSA because there were certain systems and means and mechanisms by which we can conduct surveillance electronically that had been in the public domain. But because of the fact that I was putting it out there, there was some attribution to me in Department of Defense, in the intelligence community, that tends to, I guess, validate some things. And it's not, whether it's just putting one thing out there, but if people do piece things together, which is what we used to do in intelligence analysis, is taking all of the nuggets and turning it into something a little bit more actionable and insightful. Here I was kind of guilty of doing that potentially also. So I had to be really careful of what things I could put in there. And in some cases, I might change the name to obscure it, and feeling like, okay, everybody knows it's out there, but I won't validate what it is. So I'll do that. There are certain other things that I had to watch or was reminded of because I was creating, even though I may not have been part of certain missions or targeting, it could create, based on my knowledge on some things, analytical inferences that could be discovered. So I had to back off some of those. So by and large, I do have to be careful, but the one thing that I have learned as I've matured as a writer over the last number of years, and it really shows how immature and stupid I was with that initial author, was I was thinking that the most important things were the tradecraft and the details and the ultra secret types of, behind the scenes conversations I'd been able to be part of or things I'd been able to read. But it turned out really the core of a good novel was the writing. And it was more important to learn how to write and to convey the emotion and the momentum and the action in the right way at the right time than it was for me to pepper everything with all of these, secret squirrel type elements, which, who's going to know the truth? Maybe, less than 2% of the population. So as long as I could create something that was plausible, then that was a little bit easier than having to, try to put in things that I, as close to the line as I could without being over the line, and finding really that didn't matter.
So when you actually put together the story and you're finished, do you look back and realize that you have a subtext in it, or sometimes do you plan? I guess what I'm saying is, so when I take home Shadow Masters Reloaded and I read it, at the end of the book, besides some of the story and kind of what you're trying to get a point, is there something else underlying?
Yeah, for sure. And I definitely try not to get political.
Right.
I think it's just more of the experience of people who are involved in, the quote unquote black operations, because it's dirty. I've gotten some good compliments of people that I feel really caught the message where they're like, man, I feel like I need to take a shower after reading the book. Not for sleaze, but for human character. And I think that's one of the things that I try to get across, because there's so many competing books out there about Navy SEAL guy this, Delta Force guy that, and Black Ops, and he's a real badass and all this. Okay, great, cool. But if you're really in some of those disavowed programs that are, waved beyond oversight, they get nasty, and there's a lot of lies behind it, and you don't always trust the people that you're with. That's bad stuff. It's not as cool as you think. And so I try to portray that in my books where, yes, it's Black Ops. Yeah, get your rocks off, because it's a cool, denied type of a space to most people. But as much as I'm going to tell a story in it, and people may get some of that sensation of they're being read into something that most people won't. Yes, you're going to get that, but I try to make it so, look guys, it's not so sexy. It wrecks lives. Kids grow up without their dads, not because they were killed, but because they just can't get back into things. You find that you're always lying, maybe for no even reason. You're just not available. And some of those things, those second and third order effects of being a person, a human who's been involved in it, there's a lot of wounds with that. And so most of the characters that I create are very damaged, and they're damaged by the deceit and deception that they're embroiled in to do their jobs. And you can't just turn it off and go home so easily.
Sort of sounds like Hollywood. I mean, I had all the right wording there anyway. What are your relationship then with your characters? And I say that because a lot of people we talk to that write fictional books with maybe some truth scattered in, or some elements that are part of the world. So when you do that, your characters, how do you feel about them? Like I said, I get all sorts of weird answers here. Some people say, oh, it's like my family, or like my kids, or like, I get a lot of different things from authors. So I wonder, how is it with you?
Yeah. It's personal, that's for sure, especially since a lot of the characters that I do create have some attachment to another individual. And somebody that I had, usually worked with or worked against. I do use a lot of nonfiction, historic elements in it, even of characters. I used to be a specialist with Iran's, the IRGC Quds Force. And Soleimani, one of the leaders who was recently killed, I had studied that guy for, 6+ years or so. So even when he and some of his deputies and such were in my books, I felt like I knew of them. And because I got to know some of these individuals on a personal basis, yes, no question, did they do things to take U.S. soldiers' lives? Absolutely. Innocent people. Absolutely. But I've always subscribed to, you play on the team that you're a part of and you want to win. So from their mindset, they're the good guys. We're the bad guys. And so I do try to create a little bit of a, not a softening, but just give a little bit of their perspective. In one of my books, Buried in Black, I talk about Iraqi translators and soldiers that had worked with special mission units but were left behind. In many cases, their families were slaughtered. So the premise of this was that they were used by the Iranians to come over to the U.S. and wreak havoc. And basically, the Iranians were able to get their strategy fulfilled in what they wanted to do. The Iraqis were able to exact some revenge on their families that had been killed. So I don't demonize those. At any point in time, I think that a reader might get a little bit conflicted, and that's what I try to draw in my writings, is being conflicted on who the adversary is at the time and what their motives are. And so if we look at those guys who are looking to kill, soldiers that had betrayed them, obviously, good guy side, us, we're going to look at it as, horrible guys, those are the bad guys. But if we take ourselves out of that mindset and put it into the Iraqis, is that justifiable? And that's where I try to create those characters to be a little bit more meaningful. And then I think with the other characters, my protagonists and stuff, I think there's, because of that attachment, yes, that's very personal. And I think at some point in time it can get so personal that I could even be writing a passage that if anybody else would read it, they're like, okay, next sentence, but I could get really emotional. I can have tears, coming down my cheeks, because of something that's triggering me or something that I knew had happened, to either somebody on the outside or somebody I'm close with, or maybe just something I knew of from a targeting situation. I can feel genuinely bad about that. And again, whether that comes through or not, I don't know. Maybe it's just cathartic to me in some means, it could be.
So your writing process, how do you end up writing? And I mean, so are you the type that can sit down and go, okay, well, I've got 3 till 9 today, so I'll write, and you can sit down and just write? Or do you have to have a certain mood in order to perform?
So a little bit of both. When I wrote the first, 5 books, I was traveling a lot. I could be traveling 70% of the time, gone from home. So that even meant that I was, staying in my hotel room, just looking at the TV, being in, team house. I could be just out in a city, and then, okay, my other option is, going to a bar or to a restaurant or something like that. And so and usually reading anyway. And so at that point in time, when I started writing, I would just kind of carve out some of that personal time, to write. And what worked for me was finishing what I was doing, going and getting some dinner, having a couple of drinks, so I usually like to be a little bit more low key, like at a bar or someplace kind of private, and and I could write then for 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours. Since COVID, however, I've been locked at home. I've also changed, the business that I'm in and how I've been involved, commercially to support myself. And I'm finding that I have less and less of that free time. I mean, I got kids that I'm running all over the place, or it's just, I've been locked away in the house doing my work from 7 a.m. till 6 o'clock at night. So am I really going to get up and have some dinner and then go back in and lock myself away for a few hours? It's just not the right thing to do. It's pretty selfish in my view, for my situation. So I am now having to steal hours when I can to write. It's forced me to be a little bit more structured in my writing, adhering to a little bit more of an outline, because whereas before I could just kind of keep flowing, and if I want to write 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 or 6, I could pick it right back up the next night. In this case, it could be a few days in between. And my memory isn't so great now where I can remember exactly where I was and what I was writing and what was happening and that mindset that I was in. So I am having to get a little bit more mechanical and structured of when I can, maybe write a little bit in the morning, a little bit in the afternoon or something like that. It's not optimal, but ultimately I guess that's when it goes from, I don't know, a hobby to a craft, and got to put the big boy pants on a little bit, and make it a little bit more dedicated to what I'm trying to create.
Do you feel that working in intelligence lends itself to fiction writing in that you're to the collection of information and analyzing? Do you feel that helps you in creating your stories and your characters?
I think it does initially when I'm marinating on an idea, and I can go down all kinds of rabbit holes to try to flesh out what I'm thinking of doing. I've got some friends that that are writers, and sometimes they'll come to me with a plot, and they're like, "How would we do this?" And I can get really engrossed in it from an intelligence standpoint, looking at, I would do this, and this is how that environment should be, and okay, now we can incorporate this into a plot, yada yada. As I'm writing now, I actually have to divorce myself from that, because I usually find that, as I mentioned earlier in the show, sometimes less is more. And so if I were trying to lecture, which I noticed I did in my first couple books, was, let me tell you how smart I am on this topic. A lot of that stuff is really noticeable to a reader, and they're like, okay, great, thanks for the history lesson. So they don't necessarily want that. So I have to really be careful of not going too deep into the weeds on a particular topic, and keeping it at surface level, keeping it with the story. And I'd say also the area that I had problems with initially and still struggle with is the Sherman Kent schooling. It's with an intelligence agency. You're taught to write in a certain way. Same with DOD. You've got a certain structure. Alan, I think you had also been involved with news writing, reporting, and stuff. I mean, the inverted pyramid, essentially. Yeah. And so when you're talking about honing those things in, you're hitting your topic sentence, and then your key thing that you're writing, and then you're bringing that down in the least amount of importance. Brevity can be in there, which is good for the writing, but on the other times, sometimes you want to embellish and get a little bit more. It goes against everything that we're talking on one side or the other. So because of sometimes the analytical writing training that came with the analysis, that makes it sometimes harder to know, when to create a little bit more or when to scale back.
I wonder also if there are so many movies and series now, Netflix and stuff, that kind of cover the black ops and thrillers and spies and all this sort of stuff. I wonder if the general population has a preconceived notion of what happens in real life in their mind, and it's quite different than what you've experienced in your life. but I wonder if, because of what people expect, you sort of have to embellish or make your characters do more than they probably would in real life. Or am I?
Oh,
yeah,
sure.
That's true.
Yeah. I mean, most analysts aren't operators. They don't become case officers. And if you're watching a movie, you've only got 2 hours to keep people in. Usually these are thrillers, to keep them on the edge of their seats. So you've got to put a lot in, and sometimes you'll dual hat a lot of roles, because otherwise it would just be so drawn out and boring that nobody would like it. I mean, there's aspects of the show Homeland that I think are absolutely ridiculous, but in other cases I think that it's got some really accurate elements to it. I think the one of a spy game with Redford, I love that one. Again, it's hokey. People wouldn't have the same level of access getting in and out of things, but there's certain parts of it that you're like, okay, yeah, that works. I've only known a handful of analysts because I wasn't necessarily working all inside the ivory tower. Those that were analysts and then went into the field. Got a good friend, John Kiriakou, who had done that and found himself in Iraq, and then found himself in some interrogation situations and ops. That's kind of rare. Or similarly, if I've been working in the special mission side, most of those guys then on the operations side, it's mostly the shooting, less of the analytics. So yeah, I think if you saw it from the real side of the meetings, the bureaucracy, the things that ended up, not happening because somebody just was playing it too safe and not making a risk-based approach, you would end up going through 99 episodes to get to the one episode where they actually did something. Wow.
So you're trying to tell me Steven Seagal isn't really, take out 50 men in a room and...
There may be one or two guys like that, but...
I'm disappointed. I mean, see? I knew it. What other influences can you draw by? But when you're trying to put together these stories, do you go outside of your own personal experiences and maybe things that you watch or listen to, or other books that you read?
I've got to be careful with it. And again, this goes back to some things where I scoffed at early, and now I'm getting. I try not to read as many thriller books now, especially guys that I don't know, because some ideas that I had, all of a sudden they put it in there, and I feel like if I put it in there in my book, then I'd be stealing it.
Right.
And most of the time, I find that because I've got a little bit different perspective, and this is, again, all due respect to the authors that I'm dealing with, but I don't think that they usually come up with something so exciting that I couldn't have thought of something like that, or maybe even a little bit more true. So I don't go seeking that. I think what I do find myself doing is I do have a handful of friends that are writers that have really kind of helped me along the way and helped my craft. So I might look at it from the standpoint of a style of how they moved from one scene to another. That's really helpful. I think the other thing that I do a lot is it's the first couple chapters that really get somebody engrossed in a book. And so I can't tell you the amount of Amazon titles that I will look at for the look inside, and I'll read the first chapter or whatever that they usually give us to see if I would put the book down. And if there's something that's really engrossing, I'll think, okay, that's how I'll change it. So I've got a good friend, Josh Hood, who's a very successful writer. He's writing the Ludlum series now. And Josh, he's like, dude, you just got so much prose in here. Just kill somebody. And so, he really helped me about midway in my writing because he just had a better command of getting to the punch right away, getting that action going, engaging people. That was something that I had to learn. It was also something that I had to kind of shift from because of my other influence. I love Stephen King. And so because of the horror books, those are the complete opposite. They're longer, drawn out, very descriptive. And then you've got to get something that's faster tempo to the point, hard punching. So it's like polar opposites of what I usually prefer to read to what I was writing. And that's very different.
Well, I'm wondering, when you're creating your characters, do you have an inner monologue? Can you hear your characters, or is it more of a visual process for you?
No, I can definitely hear them. And now whether I'm able to convey that is the struggle, and probably with most writers. But no, I can hear their voice. I can usually picture what they look like, usually by almost an actor, someone that I might think of. In one of my characters, Lars, I thought of, I hope I'm getting his name right, Brendan Gleeson, who is in Mel Gibson movie Braveheart. He's a big red-haired guy. So I used to always think of him as I was writing some things, and then other visuals, I might get, and then that kind of draws it out too.
So you were thinking of me when you created your agent here, I'm sure. Sean Chevet, right? You were picturing me doing all these things.
Definitely the next one, Al. Definitely.
Oh, you're writing a drama then, eh? No, it's just, well, I wonder, but now, so on your Sean Haven books, and just like some of the others where you have more than one novel that kind of work together with the same character or something, does each book stand alone, or do you have to read them all in order?
No, you can, they each can stand alone. And as a matter of fact, I did draw them into the same world, so everybody knows each other. And it can actually be done where you can start with the Sean Haven's novels. There are 3 of them, and then they dovetail into the Task Force Orange novels, and there are 2 of them. So you could go from one all the way to the other. Or you could do it the Star Wars way of starting at the last 2 and then going to the very beginning, and the same thing works. In many cases, just because I feel like they were written better, if somebody asks me where do I start them at the Task Force Orange novels, because they can get a feel for the characters, and then they can jump back to the beginning and be a little bit maybe forgiving on some of the earlier writing that I did.
Well, that's a common thing, right? You can, I think for any writer, if you go back to earlier stuff, it's always sometimes with a cringe, right? Because we get better, and then if you reread something you've written quite a while ago, you kind of go, ooh, I would do that differently, or I would change this, or I can't believe I did that, or that's kind of a normal feeling, because you're going to keep progressing as you go. So
it is, and maybe it was by ego. The publisher now that I'm working with for the Sean Haven series to republish them, Force Poseidon, when they first approached me about the book, I was like, why would I publish these? Do I really want to give somebody else the money? I'm making this, it's all coming to me. But it gave me the opportunity to re-release the books with more editing, and to have somebody else take a look at them and see what they would do differently. And so they've made them better. And I think that once I had gotten published, I know, and I don't want to disparage the indie, because that's really kind of my world, and I've got a lot of good friends, and there's a lot of great writers in there. But I think that I felt like, because I had been published and somebody had taken a look at the books, edited them properly, I didn't want to make it look like, here were still some of what I perceived as my minor league books that people would be going back to, and if they started with them, maybe they wouldn't go to the others. So I definitely did want to have a redo, and then publish it through the smaller house.
Yeah, and that's understandable, because a publisher will put you through the ringer, right? They, the editors and all of that stuff. So there's kind of they want to make your book better, so there's kind of an achievement there. There's nothing wrong with the independent writer, self-publishing and stuff. It's just, it's how you take your writing. And if you challenge yourself by speaking to other writers or editors and having other people go through it before you publish it. So, it's a process. Do you have problems developing Sean Havens, for instance, each book that you go through? And if you develop, do you have problems remembering what he might have felt or did in one book a few years later?
I do. And so that's, I have to give credit to guys like Mark Graney, Brad Taylor, who write these series, on and on. I'm like, I just couldn't do it. My memory is not that good. I don't care to reread my stuff. So I can't see how I would progress much farther with any of the characters. Now, I still have at least one book left in the Task Force Orange that I would like to do. And then I'd like to, move that on if I continue with the military thrillers. But I've gotten to the point now where I have wanted to enhance my craft. I did get into a bit of a quandary with my oversight readers, not readers, but the review board within DoD and the intelligence community, because the topic of Task Force Orange and that special mission unit, they didn't want me to write on that anymore. And they made it very clear that there was going to be some delays in my getting these things approved, which doesn't really help from a production standpoint with a publishing house that has to set a date. And so it just is less feasible. So I'm still thinking about how to get creative on getting those books still out there, but without it being either me going against my obligation or pissing anybody off. But again, because I want to enhance my writing some, I have gone back to my true passion, which is that suspense horror, and really trying my hand at not playing the card of ex-intel specialist that's writing these, so you guys should show up. It's kind of like, here's an author, he wrote a story, and if you like it, it kind of goes on its own merits, and that's what I'm really hoping to do. So we'll see. I saw that tomorrow, or I guess the next week. You've got Richard Chismar on there, and big fan of him, and so it's a different community, and I learn a lot by reading the books of guys like him, because they just have a real great way with words and creating an image that you don't always need to create by just talking about a certain gun or ammunition or whatever it is. So it's kind of, it'll be an interesting journey.
Absolutely. I was wondering, are you this type of a writer where have Sean Havens ever done anything, or any of your characters, that just surprised you, maybe gone off the rails, did something that they weren't, that you hadn't expected that they would do within the story, or are you totally in control of your characters and you just kind of direct them and they go where you want them to go?
No, they do what they want, and one case, a guy died because of it that I wasn't planning, but I was like, well, there's that. And another one, I've got a character, Prescott Drager, who's really just a despicable human being. I don't find myself, I don't have anything internally where I would ever abuse a woman, engage in prostitution or things like that. But in my second book, Prime Charge, this guy just does some despicable things. And the way he was just beating on somebody, I'm like, where the hell is this coming from? But it was like, it was just, he was in a drug-induced state. He's just a really damaged person. He's horrible. And I let it go. And the next thing you know, we're in like a pit bull type situation out in Eastern Europe. And it was just really, really a very dark book that I wrote. And I don't know where it came from. I don't know that there were some career things going on with me that were a challenge, but nothing in my personal life and nothing that should have been that dark by any means. But for whatever reason, just some real nasty stuff came out that these guys were doing. And I don't know. I mean, I thought I was one of your interviews that you had done, Al. I know you were talking about kind of even where you were on the spectrum and how when you are talking to killers that it really didn't affect you. You're not a sociopath. But yet there's something that you could just kind of look at matter-of-factly. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, and I'd love to get your response. But I think in this case, it was just very benign to me because it was just what they were doing. I was just like over them listening to what their story was. I just happened to be writing it. I don't know, does that resonate at all?
Well, that's how I live. People don't know if I'm serious or not. Actually, I just got a really interesting review. A writer actually sent me an email talking about my Leopold and Loeb book and how he couldn't believe, he really enjoyed it, and he said he couldn't believe how I could be so non-judgmental and as a matter of fact when I'm talking about the details with the killer. And it's like I don't see how it could be any other way because that's how I was born, and I've always had that. That's just who I am. So I'm not sure. I don't know how else I can describe it, but that's just what goes on with this brain,
Yeah, I guess in some ways I feel, I don't know, I feel the same way, but I feel in a similar manner of there may just be some wiring of me that maybe controls certain things on the outside, but they may be in there. I don't know. It's funny because my dad, he won't read any of my books. And my uncle, who just devours them, he gets really, really upset with my dad. He's like, how come you can't read these books? He's like, they're too violent. I don't like the language that he uses. It just doesn't seem like somebody that I know. Well, I look at those books too, and I'm like, I don't seem to know that person either. It's written. I might read something over a year or two later. I'm like, did I really write that? It kind of comes out. Don't know where it comes from. It's not how I necessarily live my life, but, it is what it is.
Yeah, sort of, I mean, I wouldn't get too worried. I mean, maybe you go into trances and start writing these things. I mean, you hear voices, it's maybe time to seek counseling.
You'd be interviewing me from behind the bars one of these days.
You never know. I've had strange things happen in my life, but,
Wait till you're writing horror.
Yeah, then, Chisler's an interesting guy, too. I've talked to him, and, it's pretty interesting. But, it's another one. You hear about his life, it's kind of crazy. So, anyhow. So now, how do people get a hold of you, or do you like to interact with people on social media, or do you do a website? How is it you want listeners to follow up with you?
Yeah, have beer will respond. I am for now. I mean, because I'm not a famous writer who has to crank out 2 books a year or anything. So I'm on social media for fun, interacting with fellow authors and readers and different communities. So, and there's a number of them that I'm on Twitter with because we do actually just, in addition to reading books or writing reviews and things like that, we do exchange beers and send them kind of all over the country to different people. But I'm on Twitter, JT Patten Books, and the same tagline is for Instagram, and the same is for Facebook. I try to diversify the platforms a little bit so it's not in just triplicate, but Twitter is a little bit more loose. What am I doing now? What am I thinking about? It's kind of random, trying to cross-promote some other, friends or people in the community. Facebook may be a little bit different in how I post that. And then Instagram is usually, again, something a little bit more personal. If I'm just taking a picture at a kid's volleyball game or soccer game, or I'm fishing, or, out having some drinks with my wife or friends, or on vacation, that type of thing. So I try not to make it where interaction is always about me trying to sell somebody my book. As a matter of fact, I probably don't do enough of that. But yeah, I'm always happy to interact. And then on the website, which is the same tagline too of jtpattenbooks.com, I think there's like a direct mailing thing too that somebody can reach out, and I'll respond to those.
Yeah, send them all your threats.
That's right. I think the only thing that I don't like to do too much, because I just don't know necessarily even how I arrived in the intelligence community or working with special mission units, is I do get a lot of young men who are saying, how do I get onto this team, or how do I get into CIA or NSA? I'm like, I don't know. These days, you just have to get it through your, if you're in the military, there's a path forward. And if you're, on the outside looking to get in the intelligence community, honestly, the website, just applying to the jobs seems to be doing the trick right now. There's a lot less of that backhanded, let's slip this guy in type stuff.
I'll just tell them you could tell them, but you'd have to kill them.
That's right. We don't do that anymore. We just now say we'd wreck your family so that you'd want to kill yourself. Well,
there you go. You see, that's how it goes. How did COVID go for you, as in your writing? Was that like a dry time for you? Did you have any issues with it? Or when there's things that are real stressful? I mean, being that you in a round and you probably deal with stress okay, but when there's outside stress like that going on of something that can't really be controlled, does it stop your creative process?
I think the creative process was there. As a matter of fact, I was really yearning to write during that time, because I'm like, here I am. There were times when there were delays at work and things. I'm like, I really have an opportunity. But I do recognize the fact I've got kids. They're getting older, going away to college. I really looked at that as a wonderful opportunity I was never going to get back, to just spend time with them, whether we were binging shows on Netflix or my wife and I just kind of hanging out, day after day, type things. It was, I don't want to sound light, again, given the tragedy of it, but it was really a great 18 months or year that we were kind of locked down there for a while, because I did get something that I didn't think that I was going to have again. I would see the kids. They weren't just going to school and going to their next activity, and then, maybe we'll pass and nobody's eating dinner together. It was a nice time. So the writing that I didn't do was to embrace something else. And I think that also gave me the opportunity to think about what I wanted to write about next, what those things were going to be, how I was going to transition into the market. That also was about the time that they started re-pushing out that first series, so I did some work with that. So no, it was kind of a nice time to just think and enjoy life.
Oh,
for me.
No, I mean, you get different reactions. People deal with things like that differently. So it's all, Dave there, he was just drunk for 18 months in the basement with his scotch, and he couldn't get up the stairs. No.
Well, Dave should have just come over with mask and a straw.
You found the right guy. I'll tell you. Poor wife out there working and cleaning, and come home and cook him dinner and everything. My God, shameful behavior. What a man. Well, it's certainly been interesting. It's one of those areas that's fascinating, and I really think you should consider having me play that role when they come up with a Netflix series with your Sean Havens.
Alan, I'm going to work it into the contractor.
That's right.
So I'll have your people get in touch with my people.
Oh, I've heard that.
We can make it
I've got that. I've had. Hey.
We'll kill Dave off in the first episode.
Yeah. Well, he's got to come back in the third or fourth. He's not really dead, you see. He's just pickled.
Be a zombie.
Yeah, he comes back as a zombie. That's the way it is nowadays. Well, anyway. Well, the book we were kind of featuring, and all of us writing actually, is Shadow Masters Reloaded, and it's a Sean Havens Black Ops thriller. And the author was our guest, JT Patten. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate the opportunity. It was fun chatting with you.
Thanks, JT.
Tired of wasting time trying to decide what to watch on your streaming service? Go to our website and look for the Martino movie reviews.
To find out more about our show, guests, or to listen to past shows from our archive, please go to www.houseofmysteryradio.com.
Show's over for now. Was it as good for you as it was for me?
Well, good night.
This has been a production of Something Weird Media.
I'll be back.